one of the latest news from Israel. And yesterday we've learned from the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, he said Erdogan is leading Turkey into dangerous adventures in Syria. Israel will not allow any party to threaten its security. They're basically talking about the way that Turkey is moving or bringing new weapons to Syria. And because it was reported on Channel 14 in Israel as well that Turkey has sent another military shipment to Syria, despite Netanyahu's warning, which was they attacked that part of Syria. They said that they're building up something, the military buildup is happening in that area. And according to the report on Channel 14 in Israel, says Turkey has dispatched a new shipment to Syria, including approximately 200 military vehicles, among them 20 tanks. The actions come despite Netanyahu's warning and about Turkish military movement in Syria. This is the new sort of trend happening in Syria. It's not new, but the escalation is new. The attack on the Turkish positions in Syria. Then you see Tom Brock yesterday said the administration is somehow concerned about what's going on there. They have to bring all sides together to talk, but it doesn't seem that happening. And the two sides, the Trump administration didn't show any sort of capability to have diplomatic or somehow diplomatic ties or diplomatic talks or maybe some sort of negotiations behind the scene to bring down the tension. Nothing of that sort have been reported so far. What is your understanding on the way that these tensions are escalating in Syria, which we know two sides don't like each other at all?
Well, I think we have to start by recognizing that the Trump administration essentially has disarmed the United States unilaterally diplomatically. We have no diplomatic capabilities to bring to bear on this situation. Tom Barak aspires to a regional role, but has not been very successful in that. He is a novice at diplomacy, seems to be quite a capable man, but it is, after all, a profession. So I'll just start with that. But I think with respect to the situation in Syria, it's pretty obvious what's happening. First, one of the great achievements that Netanyahu claims of his many years in office in Israel is the disarmament and subjugation of Syria. Basically, he left Syria with no way to defend itself. And although it's run by an ex-Salafi jihadi, Ashara, the Syrian government basically is desperate not to have a fight with Israel. So it has basically been reduced to an Israeli sphere of influence from the Israeli point of view. The Turks challenge that. They challenge it in terms of their own influence in Damascus, their role in supporting Ashara and his ascent to power. They exercise influence in Syria now through the provision of military equipment, which would give Syria some minimal capability of defending itself against Israel, and thus undo the subjugation that Israelis achieved with their profligate bombing of Syria after the Assad government fell from power. So this is all obvious. There's another element to this, however, and that is that there is a sort of bromance between President Trump and President Erdogan. And this includes the possible readmission of Turkey to a role in producing the F-35 and to actually acquiring F-35 fighters. Turkey is, of course, building its own fifth generation jet fighter, the Khan, but that is not easy. These are very complex weapon systems. And Israel is going all out to prevent that from happening. So Israel Israel really has, generally, any Israeli policy is going to have a heavy information war component to it, and I think that's part of this. So they're ratcheting up the criticism, the alarmism about Turkey for reasons related to their position in the United States, as well as what's going on in the region. And as you said at the outset, and I do underscore it, the United States has no capability to maneuver in this space. Let's look at U.S.-Israeli relations. Essentially, Israel has defiantly rejected everything that Trump has asked them to do or not to do, as the case might be. We've had the sickening spectacle of Mr. Trump's son-in-law going to Jared Kushner, going to meet with Netanyahu and basically telling Netanyahu he can continue the genocide in Gaza. This happening as Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Minister of Security, says things that are bone-chilling. We always knew he was a sadist. Now he's an openly professed mass murderer. So the Trump administration has shown no willingness to rein in Israel in practice. It talks about it, but it doesn't do anything. And that is true also in Lebanon, which Ambassador Barak is mostly concerned about as a Lebanese American. And it's true of Syria. So I think the prospects that there will be an escalation between Turkey and Israel are real. And we'll just have to keep watching that space. I don't think anyone can do anything. Maybe the best positioned country to do something is actually Russia. But the Russians have their other concerns at the moment and don't seem to be very active either.
Do you think that Israel would do something? I would argue because the way they're attacking Lebanon, they're attacking Syria and Gaza, there is no limitations to what they're doing. And this attack on Syria, on Turkish positions, if we can put it this way, would bring a new front for the United States, which didn't exist before. How is that going to be perceived? How is that going to be? Is that going to be manageable? Do you think that militarily, I'm talking about? Because if something happens militarily, they have to respond. Put the Turkish government in a position that they have to respond, and that brings a new escalation to what's going on.
Well, exactly. I mean, the possibility of horizontal escalation in the region has always been there, but this is very dangerous indeed. I think the Turks don't want to have a fight with Israel, in part because they want to hang on to their relationship with the United States, and they know that Israeli political power in the United States would be brought to bear on them. I don't think many Americans appreciate the strategic importance of Turkey. And I just remind everyone that whereas Israel is a liability for the United States, it gets us into trouble and causes instability in the region. Turkey is a force for stability, but it is also at the center of a vast array of American and other interests. You simply cannot conduct a policy toward Israel, toward Palestine, toward Syria, toward Lebanon, toward Iraq, toward Iran, toward the Caucasus, toward the Black Sea, toward the European Union, NATO, Greece, Cyprus, the Balkans, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Central Asia, Afghanistan, without, or for that matter, the Arabian Peninsula, without at least the acquiescence of Turkey, if not its cooperation. And Turkish-American relations have been, in my view, largely neglected by Washington, which is very risky. And when you come down to a crunch like the one that you're positing, that is Israel Katz, the defense minister of Israel, talking about the unacceptability of any hostile force on Israel's borders. When I saw that, my immediate reaction was, what borders? Israel has no agreed borders. Israel is expanding its borders. Should Israel be surprised if it murders and maims other people, that they fight back? I suppose it is surprised because so far the only effective opponent it has encountered is Iran. Hezbollah in Lebanon has done a pretty good job of defending Lebanon, but it has not really gone after Israel on its own. Its actions have been reactive and defensive. And now we have, in the case of Iran, a clear change of policy from a purely defensive posture to one that is open to going on the offensive. What does this mean? I think it means a number of things. One of which is that if there is a provocation of some serious sort from the United States, Iran may very well strike Israel directly. I think Iran has done a pretty effective job of convincing the Gulf Arabs that they cannot afford in the long run to have American bases on their territory, that those bases are an invitation to attack rather than a defense against it. And of course, we have the situation now looking at Iran, where Iran does occasionally, apparently, strike vessels trying to evade its control of the Strait of Hormuz. There's talk in Tehran, I gather, about an escalation against the U.S. Navy blockade presence, actually striking the ships, which Iran has been pretty careful not to do. It's made some menacing gestures, but it has not actually struck an aircraft carrier or another escort vessel. So we face the possibility of escalation now, not just in the Persian Gulf and against Iran and in the Strait of Hormuz. We're seeing an escalation in Yemen, or at least the reemergence of Somali piracy as an adjunct threat to transit of the Bab el-Mandeb. And you're quite correct to point to the escalating tensions between Turkey and Israel as a danger. So this is not a pretty picture. It seldom is, but this is particularly bad. Finally, I note that the Treasury Secretary, Mr. Bessent, is proposing to violate international law with secondary sanctions against American allies and others. And this at a time when the dollar is quite shaky. The bond market is showing signs of nervousness that have not been evident before. And I think this effort by Mr. Bessent to implement Donald Trump's proposed all-out economic warfare on Iran is very likely to draw a rebuff from American allies and to isolate the United States and damage the financial credibility of the United States and generate blowback rather than support for the Iran policy. So I think this is all very dicey, and I'll stop here.
Looking at the policies in Washington vis-a-vis the conflict in the West Asia with Iran, is that they were, before announcing that Donald Trump and the announcement of Donald Trump yesterday and the day before, that they're going to go all out economically, financially, to put pressure, tremendous pressure on Iran. Before that, we had a report from Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about Donald Trump and his administration. They're talking about the use of nuclear weapons to be used against Iran. And she said in that tweet, she said, I'm not speculating. I know that's happening. It means that she has, direct information from someone there who is informing her, or somehow she's getting the information firsthand. What is your understanding of the conflict? Is that, do you see the possibility of having, of having a nuclear war or attacking Iran by nukes?
Well, I certainly hope not, but you can't rule this out. I mean, there are two factors operating here. One is the slow erosion of the so-called nuclear allergy. That is the recognition that the use of nuclear weapons again, of course, the United States is the only country ever to have used them against a civilian population. There are efforts being made to downgrade the significance of that. People saying, well, the firebombing of Tokyo killed a lot more people than Hiroshima and Nagasaki did. Maybe that's true. That's not the point. Those were relatively low yield, initially developed nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons today are vastly more destructive. And so what would be the target in Iran? You could make a case for a nuclear targeting of a nuclear facility that is deep underground, on the theory that the only way you could destroy that facility would be with a nuclear strike. But if you do that, you cross the barrier into the use of nuclear weapons as a routine tool of war. And that opens Pandora's box. Of course, there are those who speculate that Iran has, in fact, produced a nuclear weapon. I doubt that. But if you attacked Iran with nuclear weapons and it did have a nuclear weapon, you can be sure it will respond. And so I think the other factor here, aside from the erosion of the nuclear allergy and a tendency now in the military, I think, very foolishly, to talk about low-yield tactical nuclear use of nuclear weapons. This is deplorable. They've actually developed some systems where you can dial down or dial up the explosive power of a submarine-launched missile. Anyway, the other factor here is the madness of Donald Trump. He is clearly unstable mentally, and he has shown a appallingly bad judgment on military matters. And he started this war, which is destroying his presidency and menacing the global economy, done huge damage in Iran, significant damage to American protected states in the Persian Gulf, great damage to Israel, much more than they've admitted, and with the prospect of further damage. His judgment is poor, and that is very clear. And so could he make a decision to use nuclear weapons? I don't think you can rule that out. If he does make such a decision, the next question is, will the U.S. military obey it? Because it would be an act of such folly, with such long-range strategic consequences, among other things, inviting nuclear attack on the United States. And here, I want to end by pointing out that American policy toward North Korea has produced a nuclear power with probably 60 warheads capable of striking the United States, South Korea, or Japan. And this menace did not exist before the inept diplomacy of a series of American administrations, beginning with the Clinton administration, of which I was part, which simply didn't understand the Korean issue and previous dialogue with the North Koreans in the George H.W. Bush administration. So there is reason to be worried. And let's also note that Israel is a nuclear power, and it has a record of savagery and indifference to mass slaughter that is completely well documented and, in fact, being demonstrated as we speak. When you talked about Israel having no boundaries on its behavior, you did not mention the West Bank. And there is a full-scale pogrom program supported by the Israeli Defense Forces to drive Palestinians from their homes, to seal off corridors of contact between the enclaves that have been left to the Palestinians, and basically to accomplish the purpose of Zionism, which is to evict everyone who isn't Jewish from Palestine. This is not a good moment. There's a lot of irrationality going on, and I don't think you can rule out the use of nuclear weapons. And by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't the only one hearing this. Larry Johnson's hearing it too, and other people with ties to the Pentagon are aware of it. And I don't know if you've got the two Larrys on later today, but I'm sure they have something to say about this.